Yeah, Frank here. He's got his own billiard room.
Yes, it's what do you call it, Kramer? The billiard room. No. The name.
The billiard?
Not billiard. Not the billiards. It was... Come on, Rudy. Come on. We call it
The place to be.
The place to be. Yes, it's the place to be.
Then I shall be there.
Now, it's time. Live and in living color.
The Grandy Man can.
Time to play the game!
Well, you always left me satisfied and smiling, so...
That's what she said.
Why do I want this?
Yeah.
Because I want to make bank, bro. I want to get ass. I want to drive a Range Rover.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it is now time for the Place to Be podcast. And now your hosts, Justin Rosero and Scott Friscolo.
And he won't stop. Because he can't stop. Brooklyn, baby.
This fruity pebble that you dealing with? I'm not your average jabroni. I'm like a big purple pinwheel rock, so go ahead and blow me. And you're electrifying, yes! But hang with me, that's just absurd. See, now you gotta tell your family you just got schooled by Barney's turd. Oh, no.
What is it? Place to Be Nation. I am Justin Rosero here, along again with my PIC, Scott Criscolo. Scotty, how you doing?
Good evening, Mr. Rosero, and good evening to the PTB Nation out there. Another good show ahead of us.
Yes. And joining us tonight, we have, making his debut here in the Place to Be, is our buddy Derrick Leroux. Derrick, what's up?
How you guys doing tonight?
Not too bad. As some of you may know, Derrick used to have a show similar to this called D-Ray's Dungeon. It was ahead of its time, and Scott and I were often guests on that show. Derrick now is our main right-hand man on the Place to Be message board. Gets a lot of stuff done there. He also can get you a hookup at AT&T. I will say that much. And he also works for, I always forget the radio station. I know it's 8:30 a.m. out of Worcester. Yes, that is correct. And I would like to clarify that. Unfortunately, you got the name of the show that I hosted incorrectly. It was the Wrestling Dungeon. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I always got it wrong. That's okay. I hosted that from November of 2007. Full-time I stopped in, September of 2007. I'm backdating. I stopped full-time in November of 2008, and then I did sporadic shows, and I finished off in April of 2009, so... It was basically I stopped because not only did we have less people listening, but lack of interest on my part. Plus, I really didn't have time to do it. But now I'm working at a real radio station in the heart of Worcester, Massachusetts. It's True Talk AM 830 WCRN. And if any of you listening out there, if you would like to hear me, you can hear me every Sunday morning as I do a newscast. I do it between 8 and 8 and 11 o'clock. It depends on our schedule for that morning. If time permits, I can get it in there. It's usually anytime we have a live show. But in any event, I am doing pretty well. And yes, as Justin said, I do work for AT&T, and I was nice enough to hook up his family. As a matter of fact, yeah, pretty much his whole family. Yeah, you got us all, I think. And also, if they want to hear your voice, it doesn't just have to be through your radio station. It can also be in our sexy new opening that you created for us. That was you who put that together, as you are the leader of our fan club. Yes, and that was also your voice of that open. So that's some good stuff. Hopefully, we'll have some varied versions, I believe, on the way as well. Oh, absolutely. We should have quite a bit, because I know I was given some homework to do, and I should have it done, and I will pass with flying colors. So. Excellent. So let's get started here today. We're just going to kind of do our general headline show where we just kind of make our way through wrestling, entertainment, and sports, and just kind of hit the hot topics. And actually, one thing I wanted to start with was some feedback from our buddy Rob Houston, who first, after he crapped all of our Wrestlemania 2 review, which is fine, I think it was more he said about the show being so bad he didn't think anyone could really do much with it. But I will say, I think we're going to bring it back, and we'll pick it up with 3, which is a much better show. But he asked us if we could kind of get into the stuff with The Rock. saying the episode of The Rock came back was terrific, so we should stay with the brewing feud between him and Cena, with a road to Mania just as important as the show itself. Two of the biggest stars going at it. I feel 15 to 20 minutes per podcast could be devoted to this. So I did get back to Rob, let him know. We try and stay on topic generally, but we do plan on doing these headline-type shows once every couple weeks, so that is mainly when we'll touch on this. So, Rob, here you go. Listen in. This is, right now we're going to get into Rock and Cena. And for those who don't know, if you're not, well, you'll probably be listening to this as it's already happening, but The Rock is going to be on tomorrow night's Raw, which is Monday, February 28th. And he has claimed on his Facebook page that he is going to go back at Cena and have his rebuttal towards what Cena went at him last week. So let's rewind a week and let's talk about Cena's promo. Scott, you want to start with some thoughts about that?
I thought he did a great job. I thought he went back to the old Cena, the Cena I think many of us have wanted to see for the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
He even got out of the talking hoochie happy Cena and started going back to that what's going on kind of Cena from 03. And I think the crowd, and it's funny because you instantly see the crowd and the guys are all like, yeah, now that's the Cena I like. And all the girls and kids are like, no, we don't like that ghetto Cena. So you can almost tell that. And you know what? With every week, as much as you want to crap on, as a lot of people want to crap on the guy's got the crowd in the palm of his hand,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of which crowd it is. And we were the ones enjoying him on Monday night, where the women and kids were like, no, we don't like this mean-sounding Cena. We like happy Cena with the glow-in-the-dark shirts. So I have to say the rap was awesome. I think it worked perfectly. And I'm curious to see what Rock will get back to him on, because I think the fairy with the tooth was a pretty good line, and which I did see that movie actually, and it was good. It was good for Cena to get a legit kickback on Rock. You don't see that very often. I'm looking forward to seeing the interaction tomorrow.
And it was good, too, to see them lift the little bit of the PG restriction, although as many, and actually this is a prevailing thought over from our friends at the Blog of Doom, many of them think that they've actually gone beyond PG and really been G for the last couple of years when you look at it. So even just going to a little bit PG and maybe even a little bit PG-13 really makes a difference. And some of the stuff Cena was saying is the stuff we wouldn't have heard. So, Derek, I'd like to get your opinion on this. Do you think this is a direction they're heading? Or do you think they're just letting the reins loosen a little bit for the road to WrestleMania to try and lure in those extra viewers who may be fans of The Rock from the Attitude Era, thinking, hey, if they see some of this language or whatever else, they'll stick around to WrestleMania?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, to be quite honest. I think what they're trying to do is, since The Rock is hosting WrestleMania, they want to get the fans back, because and I think you guys will agree with me that. I think that at the start of the new millennium, wrestling was pretty much the fad. No matter where you go, people were watching it. I'm sure it probably was more like 98, 99, but, this was still a period where everyone was watching it. It was the best thing going, and The Rock was along the lines of Hogan and Flair as being sort of a household name out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what it's going to come down to is that I think it's going to be... You're gonna see. I bet we'll see a lot of this, because if Rock's gonna be on Raw tomorrow night, he's gonna give his response. You listened to his promo 2 weeks ago when he was announced as the guest host, which I thought was very good, by the way. I know you guys have discussed it, but I thought it was a very good one. It was great to see him come back, and the fact that he got Candy Ass in there, and he got it was kind of basically we were brought in for those who never saw The Rock. They were given a new experience, a new lesson on what wrestling was like 10 years ago. And for us fans who have been fans for a long time, we got a nice little refresher course, we could say. And it was a great nostalgia trip, I'll say. But I think when it will come down to it is we're going to see a little bit of both. Will it continue past WrestleMania? That's going to depend on how well WrestleMania did. It's going to depend on how many people buy. It's going to depend on ratings as well, because, I bet what's probably going to be is Vince is going to look at the ratings. I'd say maybe a week or two before Mania, and then he'll think about what he wants to do, because it also depends on what their future holds. Because I believe the real reason why they went PG was because Linda was running for Senate, and unfortunately she had lost, but. And there's talks of her possibly running next year because there's going to be an open seat because is it Joe Lieberman who's retiring? Scott, you might answer. You might know that.
Yes. Joe
Okay.
Lieberman is the one retiring. Yes.
Okay. So
Well, the
yeah.
thing too, though, Derek, and not to cut you off, but
No, that's fine.
the other thing, in addition to Linda, is the Mattel deal, which is a really big deal for them, and that is obviously driven towards kids. So you wonder, though, whereas we'd like to maybe see this continue past WrestleMania, regardless of ratings, I really wonder if they're going to be able to push the envelope too much. But like I mentioned, a lot of people believe they've actually been a G rating for a while, the way they've been, acting and talking. So maybe going to PG still keeps them in the good graces of Mattel, but also can kind of, give that extra little something to the fans that want to see a little bit more edgy of our product.
Well, you're right. I was actually thinking about that because the thought that came across was Mattel, that Mattel deal that they had. Well, Mattel does make toys for little kids, but they also make toys for teenagers too.
Yeah, but teenagers aren't buying all those wrestling figures.
No, but that's because they probably weren't as cool as they were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But then again, I think even if I don't think it's going to be a big issue if they kind of up the ante a little bit in terms of the content that they put on TV, but at least they're testing the waters, we'll say. I mean, they haven't done. Well, when was the last time we saw something like this? Probably, I want to say 07, maybe 08.
Yeah, things definitely started to turn, with the Benoit stuff, because before then they were still a little bit edgy, still doing a lot of the stuff with Edge, where he was still pushing the envelope a lot, and then they had the thing with Vince getting blown up, and 07, that the product is often overlooked at how hot that first half of 2007 was. The weekly program was actually getting to be quite good.
Yes,
and I think interest was really starting to come back at that point, and then the Benoit stuff just really derailed them big time. And then the refocusing the wellness policy, and then eventually the Mattel deal and the Linda stuff kind of totally took it off course. But Scott, quick question for you now: if you look back in the early '90s or late '80s, the programming back then was pretty much PG, but they did do edgy stuff like the snake biting Macho Man and Earthquake crushing this, like different things like that. And the stuff of Flair and the pictures of Elizabeth. So I think you can get away with having some edginess in a PG product. Do you agree?
Yeah, I remember. God, even SummerSlam '88 when Elizabeth took her skirt off in front of the Mega Bucks. Even that was pretty risque for summer 1988 standards. But definitely the thing that I remember really tipping the scales was when Jake had the snake bite Savage's arm. That was just insane. That and the alleged spurs going over Brutus Beefcake's face from Outlaw Ron Bass, even though it was covered, the big censored X on the screen. I mean, little things like that. They're not too risque and they're not too controversial, but you do that in a 1987, 1988 product, and kids 11, 12 years old are like, "Oh my God, mommy, Brutus Beefcake's face got ripped off," kind of thing, and it's a big deal. It definitely had its moments, but they definitely, were able to work it well, where as much as it was controversial, it didn't cause problems. And
Vince did catch flack at the time, though. If you actually go back and read some old newsletters and other things, he did catch some flack for putting his product out towards kids, but then doing stuff that maybe shouldn't be aimed at kids. And he did catch some shit back in the late 80s and early 90s, so maybe learning from that is why he went so conservative this time around.
I think a lot of it was it was a fine line to toe, because obviously the toys and stuff were catered towards kids. Vince wanted I lost my train of thought. Wanted the parents to bring their kids to the shows. You had some teenagers, and obviously as they got older, 1991, I was getting into college, so at the time you're like, oh, well, you wanted the product to be a little edgy, but not too crazy. And finally, by the mid-90s is when he realized, I can't do this anymore. The fans, I'm trying to hold on to my 80s fans, and they're going away because they think the product's dumb, and I'm not gaining any new fans because the product is not exciting. And I think he was towing a tough line, which I think he getting that flack from certain things was a problem. But then by the time the Attitude Era came around, he's like, I don't really care. I'm just gonna bring back my old fans by giving them boobs and vulgarity.
Well, a lot of that too is Vince Russo and Shane and Shawn Michaels were the three that really pushed him in that direction, and made me feel that more so than the whole money thing with Brett was the main reason Vince kind of pushed him out the doors, because he knew he was going to kind of go against that grain. So wanting to take that, after he kind of listened to Shawn and Shane and Russo, to kind of push things in an edgier direction. And really, that time period is like the only time I think that type of product can really fit, because it was the Jerry Springer era. It was the, all of a sudden the restrictions on TV were starting to become a little bit looser. And that's just kind of what things were headed in, that rebellious direction. And really up until, I think around 2000, 2001 is when they had to kind of rein that back in, to be honest, after 9/11, when things started to get a little tighter, and then with the Janet Jackson nipple slip is when things really, shit really hit the fan as far as restrictions on television. So I don't know if they could really get away with a lot of the stuff they were doing at that point anyway.
It's funny you brought up the nipple slip. That's funny. Yeah, and I think right now, Vince in the mid 2000s was kind of it, and we've been saying the same thing, Justin. Even taking a breather on our WWE reviews. Really, by the mid 2000s, it almost seemed like the product didn't have an identity.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, here's another show with some guys, and here's another show with some more guys, and here's another show with some more guys, and oh wow, these guys are wrestling again, and here's another match again, and really it seemed like there was no real direction they could take. So I think they decided to kind of go backwards and went to this more G-rated product. And as much as they were taking a hit from fans like us, they were gaining back some younger fans, or creating some younger fans. Because the issue is, you're not going to make, and I'm on my old radio show with my old co-host Johnny Reckless, we talked about you can't please everybody all the time, and right now he needs to please the fan base that the money's coming in, and that's kids. When was the last time any of us went to a live show? It's been a couple years.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of us at arenas right now. You see parents with little kids wearing their little glow-in-the-dark purple Cena T-shirts. You don't see anybody wearing.
If they changed it though, would we go? You know what I mean? Like, is that? Are you saying that the product is the way it is because people aren't going, or is it the other way around, where people aren't going because the product is the way it is? I mean, you're telling me you wouldn't go to Raw next week if Rock was going to be there and they were going to be cutting promos with him and Cena in an edgy fashion? I mean, I just passed up on going to Raw, a month ago in Providence. Normally I would have jumped at that chance, but because I didn't think anything huge was going to happen, I didn't go. But now if you look at it, I'd probably go if it was next week. Derek, how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm in the same boat as you guys are. If the Rock was going to be in Boston, Raw was. Let me rephrase that. If Raw was going to be in Boston, and the rumor is that the Rock is going to appear, and just like you said, he was going to cut promo with John Cena in an edgy fashion. That shows that, just like back in the Attitude Era, anything can happen. So I would definitely go. But let me ask you guys this. Scott, you had mentioned that there was no real identity in the mid-2000s. Do you think that when they had come to the apex back at WrestleMania 17, and then everything kind of, was kind of lost in the shuffle, and then 2002 came around, and after 9/11, everything seemed, you said no identity. Do you think it, and then Justin, you can answer this too, do you guys think it could have been like a transition period, say 2002 to maybe, I want to say maybe 04 or 05. Do you think it could have been a transition period? Like they're just basically in a bit of a transition period before they turned the clock back and went backwards?
This is kind of how I always looked at it, was that, to me, a lot of people say WrestleMania 17 was the end of the Attitude Era. I don't think so. I think that was the peak of the Attitude Era. It's when everything kind of hit. The highest point was going to be, it was the biggest show, ECW and WCW folded, everything, came to a head on that program. And then over the next 2 years, you still had a continuation of the Attitude Era style, but things started to change a little bit and slow down. And I think WrestleMania 19 in 2003 is actually the official end of that era. That's where you had Rock and Austin had their final match, and they kind of passed the torch in a way to Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar. And I think it was at that point, really, that they should have become, really the top dogs. And they did in a way, but they were always sharing that spotlight. So I think what happened is you kind of missed that transition, whereas Angle and Lesnar and Benoit, those guys could have been what Brett and Shawn were in that 94-95, kind of take that ball and run with it. Unfortunately, they ended up getting, Brock left and Angle got hurt and things kind of fell apart. So they still ended up having to rely on those older guard, such as Triple H and Undertaker. And so by the time they started to break down, which is in the last couple of years, outside of Cena, they don't really have that top-level talent ready to take over because they kind of skipped that in the middle of the decade. Scott, do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, I think that what happened was talking about the apex of the Attitude Era at WrestleMania 17. Seemed like after that, they bought WCW, they won the Monday Night War, and this is where I think Vince, business-wise, had two problems. Number one, by the time WrestleMania 17 rolled around and we started getting into the alliance and all that and the whole invasion angle, he was also halfway into the XFL, and by March that was a bomb. Maybe even February it was a bomb. And then he was so focused on burying WCW that instead of really looking at the roster and going, let me pick these guys out and what can I really look at the future with? Instead, he just wanted to destroy them all and just kind of blew them to bits. And by the end of 01, I think he realized, oh, that probably wasn't smart. And then by 02, he had a ready-made WrestleMania storyline for Triple H coming back from the injury, and then Hogan came in. And so I think 02, Vince was kind of riding the nostalgia wave with Hogan coming back early in the year and then Shawn coming back late in the year. Then by 03, I think you finally saw the WCW 2099 look where I think the roster looked a little vapid. And, you're like, oh, God, I throw Scott Steiner in here and he gives me two absolute pieces of crap in a row. And then I think you realize, wow, this roster is really not that great. And so I agree with you, Derek, that I think 03 and 04, Vince kind of needed to, let me just put in the guys that everybody likes. And I think that's why in 04, Chris Benoit finally got his shot, because it was an easy, ready-made character and storyline to create because everybody loved Benoit. And him winning the Rumble and then finally winning the big one was big for them. And then by the time you get to 05, now it's time to, now you got to push the new guys. And by that point, I think Vince kind of did not have enough foresight to really look ahead on how to.
Well, I think and just to piggyback on your point was that the Benoit, Eddie, that era, and Angle and Brock was very short-lived, and he didn't really let them bridge to the young guys. He only gave them, that short term. And Benoit said, I know you're a Triple H fan, but say what you want. At that point, Triple H still made himself the focal point of Raw, and Benoit as champion was pretty much neutered. And even if you want to throw Orton in with Cena and Batista, instead of letting those other guys that had waited so long to bust through have their run to be the bridge, he panicked, and Eddie freaking out was part of that. And then he ended up pushing, those other guys really soon. So now we're to the point where it's been 6 years since Cena, has been the main guy, and it's like, it's already getting. This is like Hogan, really, from like 84 through 91. Like that's where we're at with Cena. And think of how long that was for Hogan. And a guy like Cena is still going to be around for a while. So I think that's just part of it too, is that he rushed these guys, didn't have anyone behind them, and instead he pissed away a whole. And even Jericho at that point, he kind of pissed away a whole generation of wrestlers.
Well, I think the other thing that Vince did wrong in 2004 too was, and yes, I am going to slightly defend Triple H here. Is that he really did? He panicked, not panicked, but it's a tough situation to listen to your audience and not listen to your audience. He listened to the audience in pushing Benoit and Eddie in the beginning of 04, and then the middle of 04, I think it was probably after one of your favorite matches, actually probably all three of our favorite matches, when Foley fought Orton at Backlash in that awesome hardcore match. I think he thought everybody was jumping on the Orton bandwagon, when in reality, Orton was not ready for any kind of babyface top-flight push. He was not even close to ready.
Right, yeah, so he didn't have to give him the championship.
Oh,
right, but I'm saying I think he panicked, and instead of just letting Benoit kind of roll through the end of the year, maybe they could have let Benoit go till the end and then have some time of clusterfuck finish, and then have Triple H win the Chamber at New Year's Revolution 05. Instead, he listened to the audience, rushed, gave the belt to Orton, realized after 4 weeks, wow, this sucks, and do I really want to give it back to Benoit? Nah, he had his chance ready. Let me just put on Triple H and I'll make up something later on. So I think that's what happened. I think as much as Triple H, and I know a lot of people crap on him in 03, but I think in 04, Vince thought, you know what, let me just stick it on Triple H. Everybody will get mad, and I can think of something after the fact. I think the second half of 04, I think he got a little scatterbrained, and I think it cost him in terms of talent. And then 05 came around, and he finally got the push with Edge, and then obviously Batista suddenly. But Batista was the best thing to happen to Vince, because if Batista wasn't getting on this big run at the end of 04, I don't know what the hell would have happened. Because if Cena was all
Orton obviously would have been.
I think they would have been a problem.
Yeah, and Orton would have been the guy that they, continued to push in early 05 because he was primed for that WrestleMania match with Triple H. But yeah, I mean, it all just comes down to, I think, still not giving those guys. He just kind of skipped a whole level of guys that could have bridged a couple years for him while he prepared guys like Cena and Batista. And while he did listen to the fans, he didn't need to, just because the fans were into Orton, they could have just turned a face in a mid-card level or upper mid-card level. They didn't need to, hot shot the belt to him. But regardless, this is definitely some interesting stuff we can get into, when we do these reviews in themselves. Let's get back to Rock and Cena a little bit.
Well, before we go, I do want to just pop in quickly. And, Scott, I know you said that people crap. I just want to say this. You know that people crap on Triple H in 03. Well, you got to look at his opponents. Let's start off the year with Scott Steiner. As you said, 2 pieces of crap.
Yep.
And I have not seen the No Way Out match, but I have seen the Royal Rumble match, and I lost count as to how many belly-to-belly suplexes Steiner gave Triple H. I pretty much lost count.
I believe we counted 11.
It was ridiculous, whatever it was.
What do you mean? 11, wait, you mean 11,000?
That was the amount of minutes that you wanted to put a fork in your eye by the end of the show. But to be honest with you, Derek, just as a frame of reference, the No Way Out match is the same as the Rumble match.
Oh,
so
okay.
Don't miss anything. And that match, at least at the end of the Rumble match, you're actually laughing.
Yeah.
The No Way Out match, you're actually mad. Like, you're making pay to watch this exact same thing again.
Yeah.
So don't get me started.
But as I was saying, I mean, in 03, his quality of opponents weren't very good. I mean, aside from a decent match with Booker T at WrestleMania, and then maybe a decent chamber at SummerSlam, and maybe a decent, I don't know if it is decent, but maybe an okay match with Goldberg at either Unforgiven or Survivor Series. Probably the Unforgiven one was better because there was more on the line than the one at Survivor Series.
I hate that Unforgiven match only because the title should have changed to SummerSlam. I mean, hands down, the way Goldberg was over.
I agree.
That extra month just totally killed Goldberg's heat.
Yeah, the way they should have done it is they should have just. I believe I'm kind of referencing your review of SummerSlam. Is that he should have just came in, blew through everybody, just and then just pretty much pinned Triple H at the end, and then he's got a title, and then he probably would have had his heat that he had back in '98 when he won the WCW title from Hogan. So,
there's definitely a lot of ways you can go back and rebook that because 03, and starting with this, I don't think just because Triple H struggled with Steiner lets him off the hook. Sure, he didn't have great opponents, but that feud and those matches, they had Triple H written all over them. There was no need for those matches to be 20-minute epic fest. They should have been a quick, slugfest brawl. With Steiner, the Rumble match should have been Steiner completely dominating him, and then him barely escaping, and then you want to see the rematch, because you think, shit, Steiner could have won the title, he got fucked by Triple H and Flair, now I want to see him win it. Instead, you just had the mess that it was, instead of Steiner just, because the idea that they went with for Triple H shaving his title was fine, they just did it in an ass-backwards way, which is pretty much all of Triple H's 2003. Everything was just done ass-backwards as to how it should have gone.
Valid point.
So, God, Scott, I'll let you just defend your boy, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. The only and everyone wants to get all pissed off that he should have let Booker T win at WrestleMania. Well, you could blame Goldberg for that because they didn't want by the time Goldberg beat him at whatever show it was going to be. Well, he already beat him. Triple H this is only like a 3-month reign he would have broken. So they wanted the reign to be so long and drawn out and a lot of drama involved that Goldberg beating him at SummerSlam would have been, or actually turn out Unforgiven, obviously, was such a big deal. And I
but
partially blame the booking for that, but
I'm fine with the long title reign, though. That wasn't the problem. It's the way it was booked. Instead of making Steiner look like a threat, he made him look like a goof for 2 straight months. And then the Booker feud, he totally buried him going into WrestleMania, to the point where Booker had to win to save himself, save any face. Instead of making Booker look credible and then Hunter beating him at WrestleMania. So everything was just kind of done counterproductive to making a title reign like Hunter's so annoying. Because really the way you want to do it was that he was barely getting by all those months, and then Goldberg finally gets him. And they just didn't do that. Like, Hunter still had to make himself look too strong, whereas he dominated all the build-up and then dominated the matches.
Yeah, quickly, yeah, we'll go to the next topic. But the only thing I will say about the SummerSlam match is, yeah, he obviously came out in the chunky bike shorts. If he really was feeling the pain he should have just let Goldberg beat him. Don't try and force yourself, because I want to have a good match, and Goldberg deserves a better match than what I can give him injured. Like, I understood that mind game, and that was just not right. So I will concur that the Triple H didn't handle that 2 or 3 month situation very well at all. I agree with that. So.
All right, well, we'll save the rest of our anger for our upcoming TNA segment, because I think they deserve it as well. But all right, let's just finish up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about Rock Cena. Here's a question I want to pose to both of you. We'll start with Derek. Do you think they should have any sort of face-to-face confrontation where they're in the ring together, or should any of that be saved for WrestleMania? And this is going under the assumption that they're not going to wrestle, because at this point, I don't think it's going to happen. So if they're not going to wrestle, would you have them not have any face-to-face, same time in the ring, same time anywhere interaction?
Well, if they're not going to wrestle at WrestleMania, it would depend on if they're going to feud down the road. Of course, that's going to depend on Rock's schedule, because he said time and time again, I'm not going back to the WWE. Well, look, you're back. But this is just in a personality sense. We're not talking a wrestling capacity yet, because I think that's still out in the open, despite the fact that he said he's never going to wrestle again. He never, he's, as we all know, never say never in wrestling. But, he has to be focused in a wrestling capacity. And, I know I've talked with you, Justin, before, and you have said yourself that if Cena won at I'm getting a little ahead here, Cena won at the Chamber, Cena lost at the Chamber, excuse me, then it would have been Rock Cena at Mania. But since Cena won, that theory is pretty much thrown out the window, all but thrown out the window, I'll say, because they might find some way to sneak it back in there, but I doubt it at this point. But if they're going to do a feud down the line, then I say yes. Go right ahead. Do it. I think what they could do is they need to pick a time to do it. Sometime, obviously it's going to be in March, but unless they do a confrontation tomorrow night, which is possible at this point since Rock said his response is going to be tomorrow night, but doesn't say whether or not he's going to be there live or if he's going to do something taped. But if they do a face-to-face confrontation in the ring, I think it's going to have to be, and there's no possibility of any match at WrestleMania, then it only should happen if they're going to do if they're going to have some sort of feud down the line. Like maybe possibly a SummerSlam match, as SummerSlam's going to be in Los Angeles, so, might as well have kind of like a Hollywood theme with it.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, because really you think something like WrestleMania kind of sells itself at this point, especially with Michaels being there, and if they do something with him being the ref, and Rock already in a capacity where he's hosting the show, maybe they will save Rock's in-ring return for SummerSlam in LA.
Yeah.
But you would think something like Cena Rock really should be at WrestleMania.
Well, yes, it should be, but they've already energized the feud with Miz, as they've showed last Monday night, which I felt that tag team match, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself, I felt that tag team victory for Cena was completely unnecessary, but if we do discuss that, I'll get more into it. But I think that if they decide that they're going to feud down the line, then yes, go ahead, do a face-to-face. But, and you're right, it should be reserved for WrestleMania, but they're already booked. I mean, there's the tease of Triple H and Taker right now. Most likely it's going to happen, but right now we only know about the tease. We're going to see Edge and Alberto Del Rio. We're going to see Miz and Cena, most likely. Rock's hosting it. Shawn's going in the Hall of Fame with a few others, probably a few other big names, people that we haven't seen in quite some time. There's the There's the rumor of Money in the Bank coming back for WrestleMania. You know, the tradition. Does it need to be reserved for WrestleMania? Sure, but if you got a bit of a stacked card already, and you think that you might be putting it a little over the top, then you don't need to put it there. But if they're saving it for SummerSlam, then it's probably going to be well worth it, because they do a face-to-face now, then it puts the puts the intensity a little high for when they do something down the road, which means they could culminate in a SummerSlam match. Maybe Rock costs Cena the title somewhere down the line. Cena wants revenge. Cena challenges The Rock. Rock answers. Rock accepts. You have a match at SummerSlam.
Right. So, Scott, how do you think they should have them meet face to face, or do you think something they should save for the WrestleMania payoff?
I don't know. I think it all depends on. I really think they need to have meet. I'm sure they're having meetings this weekend and have had meetings and are probably met before the Raw as to how they really want to do this, because I don't think that that having them go out there and then come up with something totally flat and lame would do anybody any good. It's booked now that Cena has to win at WrestleMania.
Obviously.
There's no way you can, because there's no other big, as much as, for me personally, the vision of Triple H's last match, and just like last year with, and I'll be the first person to admit this, Shawn Michaels' last match has much more sizzle than Triple H's last match. I'll be the first person to admit that. That was just my personal benefit. But otherwise, there's really not one match on this card that would sizzle the crowd as to watching Cena finally shut Miz up.
Right.
And so having the Rock Cena interaction on Monday night would not be that big a deal, as long as they don't interact at WrestleMania and you don't see them again until maybe July.
Well, I think they have to. I think they have to interact at WrestleMania. I mean, I think Rock. See, a lot depends on if they're gonna have Shawn be the ref in Triple H Undertaker, because you wonder, will they want to do two guest referees on one show like that? But I think with I think the payoff here has to be holding off Rock Cena, make people want to see them meet finally in the ring. Even if Cena's fighting Miz, they can still have him come out halfway through the show and finally do that face-to-face in-ring confrontation with him and Rock. You've come this far. I'm fine with having Rock on every other week, and every alternating week Cena, rebuts, and they go back and forth, and you kind of save that big payoff for the show that everyone's paying the most money for.
All right. Well, I understand that, and I think it all depends on what they want to do that Sunday in Atlanta, and I think it also comes down to how they're going to have the match layout and things like that. Because if you want Rock and Cena to meet at WrestleMania, you got to do it last. So I don't think Rock will be the referee. I think they'll focus on the Shawn, because Shawn will be needed to kind of give some sizzle for that Triple H Taker match. So I don't think they'll do. I think Miz, Miz deserves much more credit. Not to branch off into another topic, but Miz deserves a lot more credit than I guess anybody's given him. Apparently, I'm reading things that he's not getting over. I don't know what crack the bookers are smoking, or if they're even watching the same product we are, but he is definitely over. I mean, that little kid. I mean, the kid's face after Miz won the belt from Orton when he cashed the Money in the Bank. What's that?
Priceless.
Priceless. It is, and that pretty much should tell you 2 seconds in, Miz is already over. And I'm just tired of the bookers whining and coming up with excuses on why guys don't deserve chances.
Well, even a guy like Sheamus, who's getting buried because Kevin Dunn doesn't like him, and it's like the guy was finally freaking getting over. They rush him into those title shots and title reigns, and then it's fine. He's finally starting to build up some momentum, and really, I think he's really made a lot of progress as a character and in the ring. And now they're burying him. Same thing with Jack Swagger. It's like they have these guys that could really be stars, and they just seem to not want to push them. And I think Miz could beat Cena at WrestleMania if Taker Triple H is for Triple H's career, and that goes last. I'd say fuck it and have Miz retain on the undercard.
Well, that doesn't bother me, because again, I would love to see I would love to see my guy get like this moment in the sun like Shawn did. And hey,
not happening.
And well, no, it will happen. It won't happen last, but it will happen.
If that's his retirement match, I think it'll be last.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, if that's the case, then is Cena going to win the belt in the middle of the show? I mean, we're starting, of course, a whole new debate here, and we'll get to that when we get closer to Mania. But if that's the case, then is Cena Miz not last regardless of who wins?
Well, I don't think that this is going to be Triple H's. I think they would have started that already. I don't think they would have waited until 5 weeks away to build his retirement up. Because they started the Shawn stuff a lot sooner last year, so I'm kind of going off of that. I think now Hunter is going to stick around for a while longer and, get that one last run and then maybe, gut it out till next WrestleMania where he finally hangs it up. I think either way, this is his last year. I think if it was going to be his final match, I think it would have happened. They would have started building it either last Monday or prior to that.
Well,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Let me just ask you guys this. Do you think the possibility is out there for them not doing Triple H and Undertaker? Because you said it yourself, if they're going to have one more run for him, do you think maybe they'll hold that off until 28?
No, I think they do it. I wouldn't be surprised maybe if they do back-to-back ones like they do with Shawn, but I think that they'll definitely fight. There's no way they're not after that. They were both doing that face-to-face in the ring. They were staring at the WrestleMania sign. And there is a story out there that Hunter was set to fight Sheamus and Taker was set to fight Wade Barrett, and they both kind of realized, shit, there's no main match on this Mania. We need to kind of come up with something, and they went too creative and asked to be programmed with each other.
Yeah, I just don't think there'd be nothing to this show. You could have had this card. You could have had Barrett and, well, I don't know about Barrett, but you could have had Sheamus, Triple H, and everything if Sting was coming. Clearly, obviously, that's not going to happen, as we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, no, there's no doubt that has to happen. And I don't know where we saw that. I know you sent me that post, that message, Justin, on our board about the whole thing, that whole storyline that could come up where Shawn's the special ref and Triple H hits the pedigree and is about to pin Taker, and Shawn realizes, man, nah, this can't happen. I can't let him do it. I couldn't do it. I shouldn't let him do it. And then Shawn super kicks Triple H in the face, and Taker gets the win.
Basically. I think I got that from someone at the blog of Doom. I just thought it was a pretty creative fantasy booking. I don't think that'll ever happen. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's too. You know why? Because it makes sense. It would actually be something exciting.
Mm-hmm.
That's why. And of course Shawn's inability to want to be a heel. So I don't know.
But it would be a great 6 to 8 months of Shawn dodging him, saying he's retired, kind of stuff like that. But so let's go just to wrap this up on Cena Rock. Let's grade out round one. Derek, who just in a quick couple words, who won round one to you, Cena or Rock? Just from a purely promo standpoint.
Rock.
All right, Scott?
Cena.
Man, I got to break the tie. I'm going to say Rock, only because he did what no one's really done
Yay!
In a while, and that is come out and really call the Cena out for all the stuff that he's been doing and saying, and he set the tone. Now, Cena answered the bell. He definitely came back swinging. And he did a lot more than I think people were expecting him to do. So I give Rock a slight win in round one, but Cena definitely held his own. So I actually wanted to bring up this other thing. This is something else I've been thinking of over the last few days, because I see a lot of hatred for Michael Cole out there on the internet. But isn't Michael Cole really just portraying a smart wrestling fan on the internet? Like, isn't that what he's doing? He goes out there, he is snarky. Anytime anyone screws up, he laughs and makes a big point of it and calls it out instead of just letting it go. He doesn't care if he talks out of both sides of his mouth with double standards. If Miz does something, he supports it. If someone else does the same thing, he's against it. And to me, that's pretty much a lot of wrestling, internet wrestling or smart wrestling fans do, where they will have double standards for their favorites. They will have that snarkiness where anyone who screws up or anyone they don't like, does something wrong, they'll call him out. And to me, I really think it's just kind of an inside thing that they're having Cole do, where he's just basically ribbing all those internet fans that, I don't want to say think that, because I think they do know a lot more than they should. But do you guys kind of agree with that you see Cole as an extension of that, or am I just kind of reading way too far into things? Scott, what do you think?
I don't think the problem with Cole, honestly, is the attitude. I think it's the oversaturation. I think he's fine on Raw. I don't think he's needed on SmackDown.
So I think he's actually better on SmackDown.
Well, on here's the problem. On SmackDown, he's got a chance to be a full-blown jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on Raw, he's only a jerk during the Miz segments, and he's normal during everything else. But the problem is that you can't take him off of Raw because his guy's on Raw, and you can't take him off SmackDown because that's when he's doing the full brunt of his attitude. I think that's what I think some fans are. I think some people think he's oversaturated by just being on way too much, and you're going to get a payoff with him on Raw. But who gets the payoff with him on SmackDown? Or is he just not, is he just not going SmackDown anymore? I mean, I eventually think, in terms of the announcers, that after Mania, I think eventually Booker T is going to go to Raw, and I think they'll just put Stryker back on SmackDown. But
well, do you think, and Derek, let's get your take on this too. Do you think Cole is done as an announcer after Mania? Do you think that's part of the stipulation with him and Lawler? And do you think he just reveals himself as the GM, or becomes what I've seen? May say he's going to be a heel manager. Do you see that happening? Does it seem like? Because to me, it seems like they're kind of starting to groom Josh Matthews to take over that role.
Go ahead, Derek. You can go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to say this about us. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Scott, because I've noticed that Cole's becoming more of a... He's got more heelish tendencies in him because he seems to start showing more of a disinterest in other matches. Because I've noticed in some matches he's voting for like Lay Cool and basically all the heels. But I think I am going to agree with Scott that it is a bit of an oversaturation because he's fine on Raw. He's been on Raw since 08, 09 when he was traded with Jim Ross, and we don't need to see him on SmackDown because if you think about it, and I'm not just talking the other shows. We see him at the pay-per-views too, and I felt that in particular, the Royal Rumble, the Rumble pay-per-view, I wasn't very happy with the commentary because he kind of took it kind of a bit too far especially the Rumble match. But I don't think he's going to put his career on the line at WrestleMania. I think it might just be a simple straight up match, and Jerry Lawler's going to get the victory probably, and then Cole might get fed up the next night and then reveals he's the GM, and maybe he'll stop being the play-by-play on Raw. But he was on SmackDown for nearly 10 years. Mm-hmm. Does he need to go back? No, he's fine on Raw. But I think they need to pull the trigger on Josh Matthews. You are right. They need to either give him more responsibility on SmackDown, or even like have him take over on SmackDown completely and have Cole be a color guy and Booker T be a regular color guy, or move Matthews to Raw and get Cole off the commentary table and then put somebody else on SmackDown. I would say that would be probably the guy who does Superstars, Scott Sanford, who I have heard him and he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's not bad on Superstars, but I almost think that, and I think it's worth a shot before they completely bury him. Do you think Stryker has what it takes to be a play-by-play man? Kind of in that gorilla mold where he's kind of the ex-wrestler, has some insight, has a little bit of exaggeration in him, but maybe he'd be a little bit more reined in. The things that were starting to make him annoying was just the way he'd ramble on and kind of bring up useless information instead of providing the color analysis. So maybe having him in that role as the straight play-by-play guy and working with a color guy would be a little bit better suited for him. So maybe you do something like have Josh Matthews take over for Cole on Raw and have him with King, and then do Stryker and Booker on SmackDown. I think another guy that they should get in the mix that would really be good is Kevin Nash. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I think he'd be great in that color role on either show.
Well, I'm going to agree, but I'll agree with you on Nash. But as for Stryker, I think we'd have to test him first.
Oh yeah, definitely. They should let him start doing play-by-play on Superstars. Yeah,
I mean, they should put him on Superstars for a month or so, see how he is. If he works out, okay, we'll move him to SmackDown because they're both taped. It's not like they're live, so they can definitely, cut, paste, edit, do whatever they need to do to make him sound good, and leave him on SmackDown, see how he does, and if he does well, great. You got a new guy, and then go the route that you were talking about. But I think it would have to be they have to test him. That's what it is. Because I've never heard him, and no, I don't think anyone else. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think anyone else has ever heard him do play-by-play. So they should test him first and see how he does, and then go from there.
I think Kevin Nash would be hilarious on any type of commentary whatsoever. It wouldn't matter to me. I don't care if he's color, play-by-play, sideline in the aisle.
I think he'd be perfect.
The only thing you have to worry about a little bit with him, but I think he's kind of over that now because he knows he doesn't want to blow this gig, is would he start being a little too insider and start kind of putting himself over a little bit? But I think that's kind of out of his system at this point. I think he kind of knows his role, and that's something maybe when Triple H starts taking over more control, Nash maybe knows he's kind of got a secure place, so he wouldn't start really doing that kind of stuff.
Well, I'll just say one thing: if Nash is the way he was back in '96 before he left for WCW, I think it's going to be awesome.
I agree with both of you. I agree with you, Justin, that I don't think Nash cares anymore. I think he just likes getting the paycheck with some watermark on it. So I don't think, and definitely with you, Derek, I think that he can be witty without being a snark. And at this point in the wrestling pantheon, being snarky is not cool anymore. We all know everything already. We already know what's going on. So we don't need somebody hinting us on the air. Like we don't. This isn't 1997.
Being snarky makes you a heel now, and that's what Cole's basically doing.
Right, and Kevin Nash is now in that personality that everybody knows, where you don't really need him. People will cheer him being snarky because he's big, sexy, man. He's Big Daddy Cool. So I don't think. I think he'll just be good. I think he'll be funny. He'll be a little quirky. I think they should give him a chance. I think he'll be really good.
I agree. I think he could definitely be utilized to help prop up the commentary role. So it will be interesting to see where things head with Lawler, with Cole, and if Alex Riley gets thrown in that mix in that match, or if they really do just have Cole and King wrestle. But I think at that point, I think they really are going to bring it into the Cole run as a commentator. I think he will be revealed as GM, or he will be that heel manager role, kind of like Vicky is to SmackDown. And then they're really going to have to see what they want to do with the announcers. But I really like Josh Matthews. I think he's done a good job. And I think he can be that next, lead guy. So it'll be curious to see, where they go with that. So with that said, is there anything else, coming up with this week's Raw or last week's Raw we really should touch about? Or you think we're good to maybe move on a little bit here?
Yeah, I think we're good. I think we're just looking forward to watching this week and seeing what happens. And, we can keep... mapping it out as we move along. And of course, just to let all of you PTBers know, we will have, of course, a WrestleMania preview special where we'll really drop the hammer on a lot of things and get you ready for the big show. But I think it's now time for us to just watch whenever you're listening to this. Show may have already happened, and see what happens and see if Rock and Cena, what their interaction does look like. And
then the other thing I wanted to obviously touch upon quickly is they started to ramp back up the Hall of Fame announcements. Shawn Michaels was announced at least a month ago now, right? They brought him out. And so last week, Scott's favorite, Jim Duggan, was brought out.
I'm ready to hear Scott tear him a new asshole.
Well, you know what? Justin made a good point. It was inevitable. But I'll tell you something. If Mr. Rotella has already guaranteed me that if the Bushwhackers are in this year's Hall of Fame class, he's going to give me a gun that I can blow my back of my brains out, because I don't think I can handle the two of them. I don't think I can handle the two of them in one Hall of Fame class. I don't think they're going to. I'm sure the Bushwhackers will be in the Hall of Fame eventually. And then, of course, that moron whose desk is right next to mine in our workplace had to put he found a picture because Jim Duggan's one of his Facebook friends, because Matt's a stalker. He has Jim Duggan as his Facebook friend. So what does he do? He finds a picture at a convention of Jim Duggan and another one of my favorite guys, Jimmy Valiant, talking to each other. Jimmy Valiant, who weighs like 11 pounds now. But anyway, as you're saying, Duggan, the guy deserves it. I know. I just never liked his character, and I could never stand as a kid Gorilla lambasting all the heels for using foreign objects, yet Jim Duggan can hit everybody with a 2x4 and everything's all fine and happy. It just never made any sense to me. It just pissed me off. But you know what? He deserves to go in, and that's fine. I hope they ramp up the somebody good this week to kind of get that taste out of my mouth. Plus, I was so happy because the Triple H Taker interaction had just happened. I was stoked. I was in a great mood, and I was like, yes. big match, and then that came on like 2 seconds later. Kind of like, it was like a,
Well, it sounds like the Road Warriors are definitely locks to go in, which makes sense with Atlanta. Abdul the Butcher, I believe, is a lock to go in. And also, Sonny is apparently a lock to go in, which is great news for all us gentlemen who grew up, hit our teens. Actually, I might be the only one on the show that hit their peak teen years when she was at her peak on TV. So I'm pretty excited to see her go in. And then you just kind of go on from there. And also, the other thing maybe we should talk about quickly is Trish Stratus came out at Elimination Chamber pay-per-view and revealed to be one of the trainers on the new Tough Enough, which starts the night after WrestleMania. And it looks like they're actually starting to maybe do a little storyline with her where she may be wrestling at WrestleMania to try and bring in some more viewers, casual viewers that maybe were fans of hers earlier in the decade. The one that it teased like they may do is her and Kelly against Late Cool. Do you guys see that happening, or do you think maybe Trish will be there in her corner or something like that, or do you think she'll actually get in the ring and wrestle?
Go ahead, Derek, you go first.
Oh, well, thank you. You're such a wonderful gentleman. I gotta say that, it kind of I think it's kind of confusing because Trish, she came back at Chamber and we found out she's going to be one of the trainers in Tough Enough. All right, cool. Then a little bit later on, she saves Kelly from
Late Cool.
From Late Cool, thank you. Sorry. She saves Kelly from Late Cool, so that might tease something there. I don't know if she's going to be in the corner. I don't think she would pass up the opportunity to wrestle one more time, because we haven't seen her since Survivor Series. Is it Survivor Series of 06? Am I correct on that?
Well, she has popped up. No, she left at Unforgiven 06, but she hasn't wrestled since. But she has been on TV since. Well, actually, no. Didn't she have a? Did she do a match with Cena or something?
Oh, that's right. That's right. She did a 6-man tag. I forgot about that with MVP and Mark Henry against Beth Phoenix. Beth Phoenix. There we go. And then some tag team.
Yeah. Wasn't Trish the guest? Wasn't she a guest host once?
Yeah, you're right. And she wrestled that night. Yep.
Yeah. That wasn't that the one where it was, or is it? I always wonder, is this were those two different episodes when Santino was a heel and he was going to say that there was no Santa Claus? Was that two different episodes?
I believe it was. I could be wrong though.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
I don't know. I just know she hosted and she wrestled. And it looks like, based on her return, and I wouldn't be surprised if she did wrestle to kind of add a little bit extra oomph to the Tough Enough, which also has been revealed that Bill DeMott is back as a trainer as well. He was one of the trainers in the third Tough Enough, and really, while the third one is kind of often overlooked because it was kind of towards the end of the run, and the first one was kind of the most popular. But the third one really produced some of the best talent. A guy like Matt Capitelli, who unfortunately what happened to him with the brain tumor, but he he was kind of pegged to be a big time star. And of course, John Morrison obviously was John Hannigan in that show, and he came out of there. So really, it's one of the most successful shows, and he was pretty much the main trainer at that time. So it's kind of good to have him back. Austin is the host, Booker is a trainer, and Trish is a trainer. I think it'll be a pretty interesting show this time around.
I agree. I think it's got a lot of sizzle. I think having Steve as a host is going to be very good, and I think it'll actually do decent ratings. I really do.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Austin obviously is the big hook there, as far as drawing in viewers and bringing back some viewers. And I think it'll be important for them to have him on Raw every now and then, maybe just to come out and kind of give an update of where things are. To kind of push anyone that may not be watching into watching if they have him on TV as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. I mean, Tough Enough was a good show back in the day, and it definitely has the potential to be a great show now. And the time slot couldn't be better because it's right before Raw. Mm-hmm. So with the first show actually happening after Raw, and my understanding is that they're putting the Hall of Fame ceremony before Raw, actually.
The night after WrestleMania, they're going to re-air it.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I read it. I believe it came from 411 saying that USA had no plans to air it the night before WrestleMania, which they usually do. They air it at around 11 o'clock. They had no plans to do that, and they were actually going to air it the night after, right before Raw. But this was a couple weeks ago. Plans can change any time. But I think the Tough Enough slot works out perfectly because it's right before Raw, gives everyone an opportunity to watch it and see it. But I was looking at the application, and the company that was running it, it wasn't USA and it wasn't the WWE. It was it was an independent company. And my question is, is it going to be something similar to what the WWF did back in '01 and '04? Similar. Is it going to be something similar to what that is? Because the description that I kind of got is that it's going to be something similar to like a real world kind of show,
Right.
where
I think that is kind of where they're headed because obviously they got the Miss America woman that is going to be trying out or be part of the show rather, and I think it is going to be kind of a mix because you're right. I believe that they aren't doing the WWE isn't doing the casting for it. There is another company, so I think it's going to be a mix. I think it's going to be a little bit real world and then a little bit of the old Tough Enough because it's going to have to be with the guys they have training.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I know that a couple of our members in our Place to Be board actually tried out, or at least applied for it. And one of them told me that it was basically for models only. And, well, I probably would believe him because I know that I've seen this guy wrestle independently, and he's pretty good. So for him not to make it was kind of puzzling. And I understand that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that Austin Aries also applied for it, and he didn't even make it either.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy. I mean, he really should be in developmental, if anything. But let's just take a moment here. Speaking of Tough Enough tryouts, just wanted to plug our show coming up later this week. We'll be with John Walters. We'll be interviewing him. He did try out for the original Tough Enough, so we're going to talk to him about that. And he has requested that we do not lay off with the questions. We kind of hit him with whatever we want and don't throw him any softball. So if anyone has any questions for John, get to us on our Facebook Place to Be Podcast page or at our email at placetobepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll go ahead and ask him. We're actually recording that tomorrow night around 9. So if you listen to this over the course of the next day and you come up with any questions, let us know. We'll be sure to ask him. Now, before we get
hit him hard, folks.
We're definitely planning on it. So if you have anything, bring it.
Yes.
But before we get on to TNA, because I do want to talk about that, let's just talk about quickly here. The Knicks actually just defeated the Heat, 91-86. Pretty big win for them to go down into Miami and finally defeat the Heat, a team that had kind of had their number all year rather. LeBron just missed a three at the with about a minute, with 1 second left to give the Knicks the win. Big game.
So sad.
Chauncey Billups had a big game. Carmelo had a pretty good game. So it looks like maybe the Knicks are going to be that team that when they get the defensive output, and and Carmelo had 29 and 9, so big game for him as well. Do you see them being anything more? And we'll just be quick on this because we did have our long NBA podcast last week. But do you guys see them being anything more than just a one and done team?
Well, first off, I have to say this was the most exciting game I ever watched on mute.
Yes.
So, without hearing any audio, I'll tell you something. I think even more important than getting Carmelo, I've never seen a guy have the Midas touch in the last 7 years more than Chauncey Billups.
Mm-hmm.
That guy just makes any team better wherever he's on, and he instantly Melo's Melo. We know that. I'm a big Melo fan, Big East kid, no problem with him. But anything Chauncey Billups touches turns to gold. And let me tell you something. If there's a point guard that you want deep in the playoffs against any team, whether it's the Celtics or this Heat team or the Bulls, it's Chauncey Billups. That's a guy that can lead you. Now, I had said on our NBA podcast with our man Andrew Rich that I said the Knicks would at least win the first one series, and could, if they are the 4 seed or the 6 seed and they face the Celtics, they may give the Celtics some problems over a long 7-game series just based on the fact they're younger. And Chauncey Billups is just a winner. I mean, he knows how to do it in these clutch situations. I was amazed at how they came back and won this game tonight.
Well, also adding on to the Billups thing is he's now playing with a chip on his shoulder because a lot of people are viewing him as kind of a throw into that deal and not really a main component, kind of like, oh, they had to take him to get Carmelo. So that's stuff that can add a little bit extra fuel to him.
Absolutely. And I think he's going to be treated just as important as Carmelo. And I feel a new sense of, I don't want to say new sense because he's really been playing great all year, I almost feel a little jump in Amari Stoudemire's step all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
Huge block on LeBron in the last 30 seconds. And I tell you something, LeBron, you see it in his eye. He starts getting that me kind of thing, because in that last possession before the foul, for anybody that was watching the game on Sunday night, they had Mike Miller inbounding the ball. The reason they have Mike Miller is exactly what they needed, a guy that can hit a three-point shot. Why is he inbounding the ball and not somebody else?
Well, I think part of that comes from him missing that three against the Celtics. So maybe a little bit of shaken confidence. But you know what? LeBron's paid to be the man. I have no problem with him wanting the ball. That's fine to me. But the bigger question is this now. This game started, I believe it's like an 8 or 9 game stretch, and maybe one of you guys can check that out, where the Heat now have to play like 8 or 9 straight teams that are over 500, and that has been, what has killed them all year, and what many people have accused them is kind of just being a front-running team, beating up on the lower teams and struggling against the better teams. And the Knicks were actually the worst team they were going to be playing over the next, couple weeks. So to come out like this at home and lose that game is just going to add more fuel to that fire of, can they beat a good team, or are they just going to beat up on the weak teams and struggle when it comes to playing the true contenders?
Well, I have the schedule in front of us.
As do I.
Oh,
look at this. Well, you know what, Derek? Since your debut, you can rattle off the teams. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that from a respectable gentleman to another. Thank you, sir. Well, we got coming up on March 3rd, which is this Thursday, they're taking on Orlando. And then the next night, they're traveling to San Antonio, take on the Spurs. Then they're off till Sunday when they take on the Bulls at home. And then they host the Trailblazers on the 8th. And then the 10th of March, they host the Lakers. That should be a good game. And then Saturday the 12th, they will take on the Memphis. And then the 14th, they actually host the Spurs again. And then the 16th, they will host the Oklahoma City Thunder.
So there it is. They definitely have a pretty tough schedule coming up. So this is going to be really a couple of weeks to show. Are they going to be a team that is going to be a legitimate championship contender, or are they just a team that has enough talent to get by against the weaker teams, even if they're not really playing the strongest? But when it comes to having coming down to these crunch time games, do they have the ability to pull them out?
Yeah, and actually, just to add on to the end of that, on the 18th, Friday the 18th, they're in Atlanta.
Yeah,
and then they're home to Denver. So really, their first cupcake game, or their first gimme, is not until March 23rd when they're at Detroit.
Right, and that's a while now. So that's a solid month where they're going to have some, be playing a lot of tough competition. And if things are going to go this way, starting here, where really the worst team they're going to play over the next 7 or 8 games, is that a good sign for where things are headed, or was it just an aberration? They had a tough game at the Knicks, but if you look at how the season's gone so far, I think there's a little bit more to it. Whereas maybe they are going to struggle against these better teams. We'll see. We'll see how they do. But with that said, let's move on over to TNA quick and kind of talk about the disaster that they had last week. They are just getting shredded by fans. Dixie Carter's Twitter account has just been getting lit up by fans complaining. They were building up a major surprise for the end of this week's show. During the show, we get the announcement that Angelina from the Jersey Shore will be showing up next week to call out JWoww, and who was on last month. Of course, the geniuses at TNA put JWoww against Jersey Shore in the 10 o'clock hour on Thursday night, so that didn't make much sense. So I'm sure they'll do the same thing again this week.
Who?
JWoww from the Jersey Shore. What do you mean, who?
Who?
Get out of here. So with Angelina, though, she actually, from what I've seen, has signed a short-term contract to wrestle. And I believe she does actually make her in-ring debut this week in some kind of tag match or a 6-man or something like that.
Yep.
It sounds like she'll be feuding with the Shore on the show, which is Robbie E. and Cookie. And she'll be having a teammate of some sort. So that was the first announcement. Also, next week, Bart Scott of the New York Jets is going to be on. He's a big-time wrestling fan for anyone that follows football. And also, this is a big edition of Impact coming up this week because they're actually moving out of the Impact zone for taping of Impact. They're going to, I think it's Raleigh, North Carolina?
Yes. So
that this week's show was taped there. So that part's fine. They're bridging out, whatever, bringing in their usual D-level celebrity. But the big problem was they planned this big surprise, announced this big surprise. Dixie, as usual, said it'll change the face of wrestling, all this other crap they always spout. And then, for those of you who haven't seen it, they basically spoofed on a worse version of the 2/21/11 videos that WWE was doing to kind of hype The Undertaker coming back. They did their own at the end of this week's show and basically showed Sting walking outside in the rain, and then the graphic 3/3/11 popped up on the screen, basically the same graphic as 2/21. So take it however you want, a spoof, whatever. It still makes them look kind of amateur that they're ripping off WWE. It's kind of like, let them go at this point. Focus on your own thing. But even worse, and I'm going to go ahead and spoil it because I don't think if anyone really cares what's going to have an impact, and if they do, I'm sure they've read the spoilers, is that Sting, actually, you know what? Turn it off right now if you, I don't want to spoil it for you, but Sting defeats Jeff Hardy to win the TNA Championship this week. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Go ahead, Scott.
No.
No thoughts?
No, I have none. I think it's dumb. I think they're dumb. I don't know why Vince Russo still is employed. I wish Dixie would take her ball and go home, and let this and WWE just take this whole roster and fire half of them and take the rest and just move on. I've just given up on wanting to like this promotion. I'm sick and tired of let's give it a chance. And really, I think that first night back beginning of 2010, big Impact, big Raw, Brett, Hogan, and everything, and then 15 minutes into that Impact, I felt like I was watching Nitro 1998. And from that point on, I've just lost all total respect for that entire company. And you're just giving me another piece of ammunition to put in my gun. So, frankly, no, I don't really care who wins. The only good thing that could come of this is maybe once Jeff Hardy's legal problems finish up, he'd get the hell out of there and come back to where he belongs. And he might be the one guy left in all of wrestling that can match Cena's popularity with anybody. I mean, he might be the modern-day Ricky Steamboat. They tried to turn him heel in TNA, and who really cares? The guy's just not a heel. He's not.
I mean, I want to see them succeed. I do. I want to see them make it. I think competition's good. I think the fact that they've come as far as they have, that they have a television program on a major cable station, and they have these big names, I just feel like it's such a wasted opportunity that they're this close. And now you got Hogan also finally coming back to do God knows what at this point. But sounds like maybe him and Flair are going to feud for the 9 millionth time. I don't know. It just seems like anytime they have some momentum or they got anything going, they just kind of reboot and reset. And it just... I want to see them do well. I do. And I think there are aspects of their show where it can be a little bit more entertaining than the formulaic WWE show. Not at this time of the year, obviously, because WrestleMania building gear, WWE is always on point. But there are times in the summer and in the fall and the winter where I do think that TNA can be more entertaining, only because they are a little more spontaneity in there, and it is a little bit more unpredictable. And they do have that edginess to them, whereas I think sometimes it's just gratuitous, like Flair bleeding every week for no reason. But there is a little bit of that mixed into the product, something you don't get with that kind of formulaic WWE show. So I do think they have their positives. I wish they would just get their shit together finally. And this is one of those things you say every 6 months, like, oh, here they come. Nope, they shot themselves in the foot. So it'll be curious to see what they do with Sting, if this was just kind of a thank you for coming back to the company and also getting the belt off Jeff, who they should never gave it back to. Ken Anderson had the title, and he was having a solid enough run, but they, as always, kind of fuck up and put it back on Jeff just for the sake of a swerve. So I think as long as Russo's there, this is always going to kind of be a mess. But Dixie, for some reason, just doesn't want to get rid of him. So I don't know. Derek, any thoughts on TNA before we move along?
Well, I think you guys have pretty much summed it up, but I will say that I have seen TNA, and I saw one episode last year, and then I saw the year before, and then I saw one episode about a couple months ago. And just as Scott said, it reminded me too much of Nitro back in like 99 or even Thunder back in 99 or 2000. It was disorganized. It had that WCW feel to it that I really didn't really want to watch anymore because it wasn't really fun. But I think that the TNA, I will say this about one thing, the TNA World title, the big title in their promotion is being tossed around like a hot potato as of late. And I will agree with you, Justin. It should have been kept on Ken Anderson because he was having a great run, and he
connects with the fans. He connects with the fans.
Yeah, and for once he's injury free, so that's another big plus. And the fact that they put it on Hardy was just puzzling to me. And now that they're giving it to Sting, it just, I mean, I'm glad that they're saying thank you for staying with us and not going to Vince. He probably wasn't going to go to Vince anyway, despite what the newspapers were saying. As the New York Daily News, that the Slammer guy in there actually announced that Sting signed a 1-year deal, which obviously never happened. So basically, it was blowing smoke. But it was a thank you to say, hey, thanks for staying with us. You can have the title, and now we'll see what they do with it. And I hate to spoil it, but I did see the tapings as well, and my understanding is that at their pay-per-view Victory Road, Sting is going to defend the title against Jeff Hardy. So
a little bit of rematch there. Maybe that'll find a way to write Hardy off. I mean, who knows when he's finally going to get his trial, but
moot point.
Yeah.
One thing I will say quickly before we move on, I want to just get this point out. I don't want to totally slam. I may slam TNA's on-air product, but one thing I will say that I will give them credit for, they're much better in the way they merchandise stuff, I think, sometimes than
I think Don West
WWE
actually should get a lot
of
of credit
for that. They have
that.
better deals on stuff. Don West should get an immense amount of credit. His $20 brown bag special. Come on, wouldn't any of us want 4 WWF DVDs and a cool T-shirt for $20?
Mm-hmm.
They'll never do that. First
Never.
of all, I got so angry at that the night of the old school Raw. I did get lucky though and buy the Hulk Hogan unreleased matches DVD for $10. I will say that. But those old school WWE T-shirts, the old WWF, the old Raw, the old Royal Rumble, the SummerSlams, $25. That's ludicrous. I mean, really? Come on. $25 for those T-shirts? That's crazy. I should have made 10 or 15.
I happen to have gotten one of those actually. I got the King of the Ring one.
You did?
Yeah.
I applaud you.
Well, it was actually a Valentine's Day gift from my girlfriend. So
I applaud her because I don't know if I would have paid for that. Maybe she got a good deal on it because I just
probably did.
I just don't understand how those shirts were so expensive. They should not have been. They just don't understand how to market. They really don't.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this. Just one last quick thing. I promise this is it. Does Don West remind you of Doc Hendricks from 1996 when he was shelling out the merchandise?
A little more effective, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because who the hell was going to buy those? Who the hell was going to buy those hideous $99 denim jackets?
With the guys on the back. He's like, you know what? You can get these jackets in the mall. They cost you $60, $70, but they don't have anything on them. For $90, you can get one of these that have, Bret Hart's picture on the back. It's like, what the fuck? Who the hell would want that? But,
there he goes, laughing like a slutty little schoolgirl again.
It turns me on, so I asked him to do it. So one last thing too.
Slutty, terrible.
One last thing I wanted to say about TNA as well. Is I do hear, and Scott, you and I know because we did go to one of their house shows. They actually do put on good live events for their fans. They're very fan friendly. They do make a lot of time to meet with the fans and provide those kind of extra perks. And also, they put on good long matches, and I think their in-ring action can be better than WWE at many times. It just seems like they don't know how to book their television show and their pay-per-views. Those long-term angles they just don't get. But their actual, live product is pretty solid.
I agree, and the one thing that I will say that going back to that night back in 2010 at the beginning of the year with the Raw with Brett and the Nitro, I called it Nitro, the Impact, they did have the better match of the night. That AJ Styles Kurt match at the end of that Impact was excellent.
Yes.
And little things like that, if they could just build on that and maybe get some good angles, but they just overwhelmed you with all the Bischoff Hogan nonsense and just so bad and I don't know. But
Bischoff
Justin's right. They do have glimpses. They do have glimpses.
Okay, well, with that said, it looks like we said probably more about TNA than we're going to say in a while on this show, but it's good. It's good to hit them up every now and then. So, but before we do start to wrap up, one last thing we want to do with the Oscars currently going on, and I think we'll talk more about this on a later show as far as the winners and anything like that goes. It seems like it's pretty much been by the book so far. Derek was able to pull up this week's box office numbers. So, Derek, why don't you read those down, and maybe we'll talk about anything that we want stemming from that.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. I actually just lost it, but I'll get it right back. So.
All right, sounds good.
Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic.
All right, well, I'm sure one of the movies on there is one I actually saw last night, which was Hall Pass. I actually thought it was
Yes,
pretty.
it was actually.
Yes, I thought it was pretty solid. Better than I expected going in. But then, as it was starting, I kind of remembered it was a Farrelly Brothers movie, and their movies are always,
Okay,
pretty
I
good.
have it.
Plus, you have all the usual Rhode Island and Providence references, which they did in this movie. I thought it was solid. I saw some complaints that a lot of it was one of those movies where a lot of the funny scenes were in the previews, the trailers, but I didn't really agree with that. I thought there was some funny stuff that I didn't see, in any preview or like that. I'd say it's a solid. It'll be one of those solid HBO rewatchable movies. Is it going to win awards? No, but I wasn't disappointed with the free pass I used to go see it.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
I have a question about comedies for a minute. Justin, when you and I had our awesome podcast with our girl Leanne Griffin, we were talking about like TV shows and how the humor has changed over the years. I watched a movie last night that I'd never seen before, and I want both your guys' opinion on this. I'd never seen it before, but it's apparently for a lot of people it's one of the funniest movies ever made, and that's The Big Lebowski. I watched it for the first time yesterday, and other than like the phrase "What the fuck are you talking about?" like every 5 minutes, I didn't understand it. Did either of you ever see it, and do either of you think it's funny?
I actually have not seen it, and which is amazing because my roommate Charlie Senior, he was a big fan of it, and I know he's talked about it many times. I don't know how I missed it in that stretch. It was kind of at the point where I was watching a lot of those, kind of movies. It just seems like something I would have seen. So I don't know why I never saw it, and I still haven't. And I'll have to watch it on Netflix, I guess, and finally catch up with it. So I really can't comment too much about it. I do know you're probably going to get a lot of shit for saying what you've said, but...
That's fine. I have no problem with that. That's why I said it, because that's why we're here at the PTB, to have some debate. I like John Goodman. I love Jeff Bridges. I actually, speaking of the Oscars, I saw True Grit and I loved it. And I've never seen the original. It's on my my Netflix list. I loved him in True Grit. But I just was watching this. I'm like, all right, this is okay. But like everybody thought this was like one of the funniest movies of the '90s, and I didn't see. I didn't get it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't understand why everybody loved it as much as they said they did. I was just curious what your guys' opinion was on that. That's all. So.
Well, I will pop in and say that I have not seen the whole thing, but I have seen a few bits and pieces, and from what I've seen, it's pretty funny. But one of these days, I'm actually going to watch the whole thing, and then I can come back and really give you an opinion on it. But in any event, I do have the movie list, and it's funny you mentioned the Hall Pass because some people expected it to be number one. Well, it was not.
I know it was, and I can't believe it.
Yeah, the animated flick Romeo and Juliet actually rose up from the number 3 spot in its third weekend as they brought in $14.2 million. It has now grossed $75.1 million and $90.9 million worldwide, and $75.1 million domestically, I'll say.
Never underestimate the kids, man. I've seen a lot of funny, a lot of little quips and jokes on Twitter and other spots saying it's kind of ironic that the Oscars are being held on a night where Romeo and Juliet is dominating the box office. So it's kind of almost makes the whole thing kind of pointless that they're awarding all these people for an industry where movies like that are the most dominant and the ones that really maybe should win the awards. If you look at it from a wrestling point of view, where it's the age-old debate, who's the best wrestler? Is it a guy like Hogan who draws the money, or is it a guy like like a Benoit or Guerrero who were the best in-ring guys? Are the best movies the most artistic and the best stories, or are they the ones that make the most money? So it's kind of that age-old argument.
I agree, and I think it all comes down to a matter of opinion. And I think it's generally said that Hogan probably is one of the 2 or 3 greatest of all time because of the money he made. But I guess it's also the kind of product you're offered too, and I guess it goes by movies as well. And you know what? The whole thing about Romeo and Juliet almost fits what we're talking about with wrestling. Hall Pass, which I didn't see, I haven't seen it yet. It looks pretty funny though. Is one that guys like us probably would enjoy. But look what won out: a movie that was mostly tickets purchased by women and kids. Mm-hmm. It's exactly like the WWE product right now. Same thing.
All right, Derek, what else we got on that list?
Well, you mentioned the Hall Pass. It was number 2. It opened in the number 2 spot with $13.4 million, and it had a budget of $36 million. So it's a third of its way there of making a profit. So our third movie was Unknown, which actually slipped 2 spots, was number 3. It grossed $12.4 million. It actually dropped 43%, which is fairly good for its genre. It has now grossed $42.8 million domestically and $48.3 million worldwide on a $30 million budget, so it's definitely made a profit. And number 4, it was Just Go With It. In its third weekend, they held even, drew $11.1 million to hit $79.4 million domestically and $92.5 million worldwide. And number 5 was I Am Number 4 with $11 million even. They actually dropped 3 spots from number 2. Number 6 was God Almighty, Justin Bieber, Never Say Never. It grossed $9.2 million, and it has made a major budget with $62.7 million domestically and $64 million worldwide. It only had a budget of $13 million. So
Kid continues to dominate.
He is definitely making some money, that's for sure. The King's Speech was in its 14th weekend, hit number 7, brought in $7.6 million. The Oscar-nominated biopic has a now total gross of $114 million domestically and $245 million worldwide, and its budget was $15 million. So I think that was a major profit. It's too bad I wasn't in the movie. I could have made some of that money.
Now, I do have to ask, is The Chaperone on this list?
Actually, it is not.
Oh, that's too bad. Because there are actually movies that grossed, and I know this was the big talk last weekend, there were movies that really grossed, embarrassing amounts, and they were ahead of The Chaperone. So,
Yeah.
The Chaperone already, I believe, is out of theaters. I think it was just kind of a one-weekend thing, just so then they could get it out to DVD.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Hopefully, maybe we'll have Derek review it and come back on and give us a review. What do you think about that?
I think it's a sham. I think it's the best movie. I think he should be writing his speech now. In fact, I think
There we
he should
go
have
again,
hosted.
kissing the Triple H ass train.
Ridiculous.
I
All right,
think-
maybe Scott should have to watch it and give us a review then.
So
You bet I'm going to, and it's going to get 5 stars. And then he should have pedigreed the kid,
God.
the daughter, and moved on.
All
that
right.
was hilarious. Anyway, in the number 8 spot, it was Big Mama's Like Father Like,
Oh, God.
grossing
it's dreadful.
$7.6 million.
I can't
Yeah.
believe they brought that back for another freaking movie.
What's that, like the 5th?
No, I think it's only the third.
Third.
It seems
So-
like 8.
Yeah.
Hey guys, big shock. They're showing a shot of the Portland bench, and Greg Oden is in street clothes.
Unreal. What a...
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway.
In the number 9 spot, in its opening weekend, Drive Angry, starring Nicolas Cage, bombed. Opening weekend, number 9, $5.1 million.
I don't know why that guy... I mean, I know he
Ugh.
kind of keeps the unintentional humor crowd going, but other than that, I don't know how that guy keeps getting big
I
paydays
don't
for his
either.
movies.
He is one of the worst actors I've ever seen in my entire life. Never liked him.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, the co-star, Amber Heard's pretty attractive.
Yes,
No
she
comment.
is.
We'll move on. The Roommate finishes out the top 10, bringing in $2.1 million in its 4th weekend.
With Minka Jeter is in that, I believe, right?
Yes.
All right, so with that done, one last thing let's touch upon before we wrap up here, and maybe Scott, and this isn't an age joke, you just may know more than we know about him, but Duke Snyder passed away today at 84. Obviously, none of us were around to see him play, but he's often, I was watching a couple of the tributes today, how they were saying he's often overlooked, because while he was at his peak in New York, it was also around the time that Mantle and Willie Mays were playing, so he's kind of often that forgotten figure. Do you have anything to say about him, or just kind of, cursory knowledge of him?
Well, my grandfather was a big Dodger fan. Actually, he went to Ebbets Field a few times, and it is a shame because it's amazing how back in those days, you had 3 of the greatest players in the history of baseball, all playing center field at the same time: Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. And the guy, what's his name? The guy that does those songs. I don't remember his name. Those baseball songs.
Right, yeah, talking baseball.
Yeah, talking baseball. He did a song, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, and that's because 3 of the greatest outfielders in the history of baseball, and they all they were all playing at the same time. And that's very sad. He was probably one of the last great heroes of of the Brooklyn Dodger era. They do call him the Duke of Flatbush, And I was in Brooklyn this weekend, and you know, a lot of people still talk. There are a lot of people wearing jerseys, and you know, guy was a 295 hitter, which is pretty good for that era. 407 homers, over 1,300 RBIs. He was one of those poor, unfortunate suckers who had to play for the Mets the first 2 or 3 years just to kind of get butts in the seats, even though they were incredibly hideous. But it's sad. I mean, but 84 years old, lived a good life.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, I agree with you, Justin. When you think of those three center fielders, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, that's almost the order, you know, that you're thought of them, unless of course you aren't a Yankee fan. Then it's Mickey, Willie, and the Duke. But the Duke always comes third, and that is unfortunate. But no, definitely one of the greatest of all time. It is a very sad day that he passed away.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there were a lot of tributes to him on SportsCenter. He's on the front page of the ESPN, you know, one of the links on the front page of the ESPN site right now. So anyone interested in learning a little bit about Duke, there's a lot out there for you to check out. So baseball loses a legend. As spring training cranks up, we will be doing a little bit more baseball talk as we get closer. Not a lot really going on around right now. Miguel Cabrera makes his debut tomorrow for the Tigers after all his nonsense that's gone on the last few weeks, and you'll see if he can finally get his shit together. Other than that, I think we're pretty much good here. We hit all our major topics, all our major headlines. So if anyone else has anything they want us to talk about, Rob came strong. He threw down the gauntlet and wanted us to talk about Rock and Cena. We did it. So Rob or anyone else, if you have anything you want us to talk about, please let us know on our Facebook page. Just type in Place to Be podcast in the search button. It will come up with the first one that should pop up there. Or our email, placetobepodcast@gmail.com. Bigelow34proboards.com is also our message board. You can come to us there. So, you know, we got a lot going on. Definitely bring the ruckus, bring the feedback, and we'll definitely read it on air or have you on, like our buddy Derek here, who, as we said, is our #1 fan club leader. So,
and
Derek,
production coordinator.
You know, I wouldn't really go that far, sir.
Come on now. So, anything you have to say, Derek, before we wrap up?
Yes, I actually do have a question. Why is Scott so old?
You had to wait till the very end, didn't you?
He's afraid you're going to kill him.
I don't know. I was born sometime. You know what? In 10 years, you'll be old. Okay, wait till you get to my decade, and then you can all see Justin lays off.
I think I got a long way to go before I get to that decade.
Well,
yeah,
you know what, Justin?
I will argue this. I think Scott looks younger than Derek. I'm not going to lie.
You know what? I'm not going to lie either. I do look older than all of you, so what the hell?
One side note, though. One little baseball tease. Big hit for the Cardinals this past weekend. Adam Wainwright out for the season-ending elbow surgery. That's devastating for the Cardinals. We'll talk about that in our baseball preview, but that's huge for the Cardinals, considering they're having issues with Pujols. That's a big loss for the Cardinals. We'll talk more about that in our baseball preview.
Yes, that is definitely a big loss, not only to the Cardinals, but to also fantasy baseball players out there who, you know, he's definitely one of those top pitchers for those fantasy players. So, with that said, sounds like we're good. Check us back later this week. We'll hit you up with some updates, but we do have our interview with John Walters tomorrow night, and then we also should have a review of WrestleMania 3 coming this week as well. So, check that stuff out. And Derek, we thank you for joining us. Hopefully, we'll have you back soon, depending on how many hits this show gets.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad to have graced you with my presence, and I hope to do it again sometime.
Excellent. And we do have a good song here. This is in honor of Scott to play us out, and hopefully he enjoys it and sends him to bed with some good dreams in his head. So,
what is it, Howdy Doody time?
You'll find out. So for Derrick Leroux and Scott Criscolo, Place to Be Nation, we are out. Join us. Hit us the feedback. We'll talk to you soon.